A very warm welcome to Dame Billie Miller, Her Life in Focus. I'm Miles Eversley. Thank you for joining us. In our last episode, Dame Billie reconstructed her winning of the 1976 elections and her portfolio as Minister of Health and National Insurance, with greater emphasis on health. This week, she begins by speaking of her work with the NIS and how Barbadians benefited from her initiatives. She uses the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic to illustrate the importance of her decisions back then.
The national insurance side of that first portfolio was important because I think I had tacked on another 3 units to it, and there was a man, I forget what this profession is called. Oh, goodness gracious. They come and they look at all of your numbers and this is...
Not statistician, actual.
Yes,
Actual scientist.
yes. And I was shocked when I said to PS, how often does the actuary come? And he said, like every 3 years. I said, no, not on my watch. Every year. And every year there was something different and new that I could discuss with him because, you know, he's a numbers man. And so we added a whole bunch of other things that people didn't have. We had a death benefit. We had a life benefit. No, we didn't have a life benefit. We had a death benefit. We had a sickness benefit. And I added on the insurance benefit so that you would have a pension when you retired. And people just didn't understand about it. I kept shouting things at me in the street. We look like handicapped to you. I hated that, although I love handicapped. But, there was nothing I could do about it. I just had to bear it. Never knowing that one day, I would be hearing how many people are lining up out there to get their pensions. And with the pandemic, how many are lining up out there to be able to pay for whatever. It's amazing. It came right around. And few people know that. I don't talk about it, really, but I never forgot it. Then there was a change. There was an election then due in 81. And there was a very important election meeting I went to in Russia. That meeting in Russia had to do with something that, again, I thought we had to take it a far longer distance than it was where it was at in Barbados. Anyhow, we won the election again, and Tom Adams put me in education. And the other portfolio he gave me was to do with the arts. Culture, yeah. The big important thing for me, once I had studied, when I go into a ministry new, I read like mad. I read. You see my house is all books. The thing that moved me most when I was in the Ministry of Education, the new technology was just beginning to come on stream. And again, I traveled somewhere and saw it. Now, I'm not technical in any way. If something goes wrong with my computer, somebody got to come and help me get out of it. But this thing just grabbed my imagination. There was a gentleman, he was married to a girl who was at Queen's College with me. And she had a brother, I think he did geology. Can't remember his name though. The name, I think he was a Welshman, married to this girl that I was at school with. And he was working in the Ministry of Education. But in the ministry, he was in a division upstairs, that same old hospital building at the time. And he invited me one day to come. Just me. And I see this big piece of equipment and so on, and looking at it, I said, you have to explain what I'm looking at here. He said, this is what a computer looks like. And then he explained it inch by inch to me. I was so giddy with excitement. By the time I got back to my office, I called Tom Adams. I said, Prime Minister, I want to take you on a visit. Right here in Ministry of Education. I want to show you something. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But it is the future. And he came. I gave him the same seat that I was put to sit in. I said, Prime Minister, you just sit there. He looked at this thing, then he looked up at me. He said, well, Billie, what is this? I said, Prime Minister, this is our future. And then I turned to the man who had put it together, and I said, would you kindly please explain to Prime Minister Adams what this is? When he was finished, and he did some, little movement on it and so on. Tom Adams was bought hook, line, and sinker. I said, Prime Minister, I want the day to come. It may not happen in my time, or even in my lifetime, but I want to see the day come when every child in every school in Barbados has one of these in front of them. And he was sold too. He was sold, and then I went at it with it. Mia Motley took over from me when I left the Ministry of Education, and that was the first thing I told her. I said, Marks, this is the future. Boy, and she took it and ran with it even faster than in my turn, on my watch. Fantastic.
Many of us recall that primary and secondary educational reform with ICT support, where the use of computers by students and teachers was introduced into our schools by then Education Minister, now Prime Minister, Mia Amor Motley. Now, on to a more in-depth look at Dame Billie's work in education.
Education of itself was so huge because I built schools as well. And playing fields had to be there, and then there were other educational institutions like the Polytechnic Community College. But the Polytechnic was of a special importance to me. When I looked through the booklet that my father had, he was the first MP ever to think that at the end of a term in office and another one coming, that if you prepared a nice magazine in color and, people could see what work you had done and would be anxious then to put you back to continue what you're doing. And he insisted that the boys he got very upset about Dodds when it was where the boys went. And just like the girls had their own at Somerville. When I practiced law, in those days you had to go to the country magistrates' courts and so on. I would stop off at Somerville. Yes, just to talk to these young women, and they were children mostly. 10 tenants, so on, though they should not be locked away in a place. I didn't approve of that. But I would go, and they didn't even have a little gramophone, nothing. But there was an old piano there. So I would play it a little bit, you know, and talk to them and show them how to make hospital corner when they were making up beds and so on. And then, you know, I'd go home. But my father's attitude, and I'm afraid we all had it. You are not to leave Dodds without a trade under your belt. And he would go there and he would tell them that. You are not to leave here without a trade under your belt. And they took to it like ducks to water. They took to it like ducks to water. And I did the same thing up there where SJPP is now. Mustn't interrupt. There's a I think I told you that last time we were here. I have a lamp there. A beautiful lamp, handmade. Different pieces of wood. Look like if the wood came like that. It was gifted to me last year. Didn't recall this person, but he told me, he wrote me a letter when he brought this gift to me out of nowhere, saying that he was there at the time when the SJPP opened, and how I insisted that you had to leave with a craft of some kind. If you begin with something and you can't finish it, find something else, but you have to leave with a piece of paper. And he has reminded me in the letter that when he got promoted, I was able to persuade him that nobody should leave up there without being able to do something with hand, and preferably head and hand. And he said that was his marching order as far as he was concerned, because I was his minister at the time. And that is still very important. I am shell-shocked sometimes, and I read everything in the newspaper from cover to cover. That you have young people in Barbados in this day and age who are barely literate. And don't have a skill. How could you leave a school and not have a skill? And it doesn't have to be a school where you only learn from the books and so on. We have the Polytechnic, we have, they're like two places. And they go in and they learn skills. Who are these fellows now who are wielding guns and, you know, smoking up God knows what? It can't be a crack. It will have to be a chasm that they fell through, that they left and came into adult life without a skill of any kind. Something is wrong with that. And you have to have the right people who teach these skills. Because sometimes young people have the making of a skill and they don't recognize it. They don't know it. But you need somebody who can see it and say, oh my goodness, I know where he's going to end up. He's going to be a good painter. You know, and we have to work harder on this, working with your hands. Not everything is always great brain power, although I am impressed at the number of carpenters that I know, of masons that I know. I drew the plan for this house. You see that work up there in the ceiling? 2 Guyanese men, one on the pillion. Look at that. Look at that workmanship. Look at that. You see these? These were little shell units that you would see if you go to a place where they're doing a lot of mason work and cutting and so on. And I asked the man to give me X number of shells. And I asked him, because I wanted it to look like a flower opening, I said I want to put that on the top of the column in my veranda. The young man did that work. It's just amazing, the quality of work. The Polytechnic, to this day, does excellent work. Louis had it up to a certain point, and he then got changed to another ministry. When I got my change, he got his. But the Polytechnic was not yet quite finished. So I put some of my touches on it and finished it. But they do great work up there. If you want your car repaired, you can carry it up there, and you know, that's part of their workshop work. All kinds of things now they're doing up there. I didn't imagine that you'd be doing hairdressing and all like that, but look, all of that has happened. There should be no adult in Barbados who does not have a skill of one kind or another.
What about those rumors regarding primary and secondary school students attending school on weekends?
No, don't mind that, going to school on Saturday talk. That is a mischievous person. I put it there calmly. I don't want to say something unkind. But a mischievous person who should have known better, because knowing your job and getting it perfectly right can either sink you or float you if you are a person who works for one of the newspapers and you are hoping to become what do you call them now?
Editor?
Yes. No, not well, you editor is the top, but you become a reporter of good repute. And you can trust the word. That is where Aldrich and I became friends, even as we were working against each other to win the seat in the city. And he is the only one who has my telephone number. Anybody wants to get in touch with me, I have to go to this day.
Under Dame Billie's watch during the late 70s and early 80s, several schools were made coeducational. Dame Billie has no regrets.
The amalgamation of the schools, as you put it, that was another one where I got cursed past my burying ground, as they say. Are you mad? You grew up you went to school in an all-girls school. I said, yes, that's why I think I'm on the right course. We grow up in families together. We go to work when we get to that age together. And we have this big lacuna in between when in the most important part of our life, when we are learning a skill or a trade or whatever. And, you know, we are segregated. Not on my watch. And I'm telling you, it's worked very well. Very well. I have nieces, nephews. They loved it. Well, they weren't nieces and nephews then. I didn't have them then. Yes, I don't regret anything about that.
Madam Chairman, the government is firmly committed to improving the quality of our primary education because it is our conviction that primary education is a bedrock on which all other levels of education have to be built. This commitment is underscored by the allocation of some $33 million for expenditure on primary schools out of a total budget of $99 million for the financial year 1982-83. To this must be added a further $9 million for the school feeding program, and the relevant portion of the cost of central administration and the Eardiston Teachers Training College. The bottom line, to borrow a term now popular in the United States of America, is that approximately $44 million, or 45% of the recurrent budget, is utilized for primary education. Up to the present time, St. Lawrence Mixed, St. Martin's Mangrove, St. Luke's Brighton, Good Shepherd Mixed, and Eden Lodge Primary are the results of our amalgamation program. By the beginning of next term, St. George's Boys and Girls will be amalgamated when their new school at the Glebe is ready. It is planned to phase out Providence Boys as soon as it is convenient and integrate its small enrollment into the St. Bartholomew's Boys and St. Bartholomew's Girls, which will both be reorganized and renamed as co-educational schools. In a similar way, St. Simon's Mixed will be integrated with St. Saviour's Mixed, and Borden's will be absorbed by St. Andrew's Boys and St. Andrew's Girls. This latter reorganization may be implemented by September.
With that clip of Dame Billie from the year 1982, where she's listed several schools that were to become co-educational, we end this week's presentation of Dame Billie Miller, Her Life in Focus. I am Miles Eversley. Sherwood will be with you next week. Thank you for your time.